ever wondered where service dogs are allowed to go? A question that sparks curiosity, right? But before we unravel that mystery, let's first understand what a service dog is. These are not just any ordinary dogs. They are trained professionals performing tasks for the benefit of individuals with disabilities. Their roles are as diverse as their breeds, from guiding the visually impaired, alerting those with hearing impairments, pulling a wheelchair, to even reminding a person to take their medication. They're like superheroes in a dog's disguise. Now, you might be thinking, aren't they similar to therapy or emotional support animals? Well, not quite. While all these animals provide invaluable assistance, service dogs are distinct in their task-specific training. Therapy and emotional support animals offer comfort. But service dogs, they perform specific tasks that their handlers cannot do for themselves. So now that we have a basic understanding of what a service dog is, let's delve deeper into their role in society. You might be wondering, where exactly are service dogs allowed to go? A common question indeed. Let's dive into it. Service dogs, trained to perform specific tasks for individuals with disabilities, are generally granted access to a wide range of public spaces. This includes businesses, restaurants, hotels, and various forms of public transportation. However, it's important to note that the specifics can vary depending on the region. In many parts of the world, laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act in the United States, for instance, prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life. This means that service dogs, as a crucial part of their handler's life, are generally allowed. In most places, their handler goes. In the world of business, whether it's your local grocery store or a multinational corporation's office, service dogs are typically welcome. They are there to provide assistance to their handler, making their presence not just allowed, but often necessary. Now, when it comes to dining establishments, think your favorite Italian bistro or that trendy new cafe. Service dogs are generally permitted here too. Food safety regulations might seem like they'd bar these furry helpers from such places, but exceptions are commonly made for service dogs due to their vital role in assisting their handler. Hotels and other accommodation establishments also usually welcome service dogs. After all, these dogs are not pets, but working animals that provide necessary support to people with disabilities. Public transportation, whether it's a city bus, a train, or even a plane, is another area where service dogs are typically allowed. These dogs are trained to behave in a controlled manner in public settings, making them suitable companions for these modes of transport. However, as we've mentioned, the specifics can vary. Different countries, regions, and even specific establishments may have their own rules and regulations regarding service dogs. It's always a good idea to familiarize yourself with the laws in your specific area to ensure you're in the know. So, while service dogs are generally allowed in many public spaces, the rules can vary. But what about specific places like restaurants and cafes? Stay tuned as we explore this further in our next section. Can service dogs accompany their handlers into restaurants or cafes? This question often pops up when discussing the rights of service dogs and their handlers. In many regions, the answer is a resounding yes. Service dogs are not your average pets. They're trained to perform tasks for individuals with disabilities. As such, they are generally allowed in places where pets might not be, including food establishments. However, it's crucial to remember that the rules can vary depending on your location. While one restaurant might welcome service dogs with open arms, another might have specific regulations in place. It's always a good idea to check beforehand to avoid any potential misunderstandings. Additionally, it's important to note that service dogs should always be under control and not pose a threat to the health or safety of others. They're working animals, not pets, and their behavior should reflect that. So, service dogs can generally go into restaurants and cafes. But what about schools and universities? Are service dogs allowed in schools and universities? This is a question that pops up quite frequently. The answer is usually yes. The rights of service dog handlers in educational settings are often protected by law. These laws ensure that individuals who require the assistance of service dogs can fully participate in educational activities, whether it's attending classes, participating in extracurricular activities, or living in dormitories. Every country may have its own set of laws and regulations, but the consensus is pretty clear. Service dogs are essential for the people who rely on them, and they should be allowed wherever their handlers go. This includes educational institutions. Of course, the specifics can vary, and there might be some exceptions or additional requirements. Schools and universities may have policies in place for handling these situations, and it's important for students, parents, and faculty to be aware of these. So service dogs are typically allowed in schools and universities. Now let's talk about public transportation. Can service dogs go on buses, trains, or airplanes? You might be wondering. Well, generally speaking, service dogs are allowed on public transportation. Now this is because they play a crucial role in assisting their handlers, and limiting their access could essentially limit the mobility of the individual they're assisting. However, it's important to note that different transportation systems might have specific guidelines. For example, some may require service dogs to be secured in a certain way for safety reasons. Others might have designated areas where service dogs and their handlers are supposed to sit. Also, it's worth highlighting that while most transportation services accommodate service dogs, they may not extend the same courtesy to therapy or emotional support animals. These distinctions can sometimes lead to confusion, so it's always a good idea to contact the transportation provider in advance. So, service dogs generally have the right to accompany their handlers on public transportation. But what about documentation? Do they need any? Do service dogs need any special documentation or identification? This question is a common one, and the answer can be a bit complex. Service dogs, unlike the average pet, are trained to perform tasks that assist their handlers with disabilities. While these dogs are not required to wear any specific uniforms or tags, they're often identifiable through their behavior and the tasks they perform. Now, when it comes to documentation, the rules can vary. In some regions, handlers may be asked to provide proof of their dog's service status. This could be in the form of an identification card, a doctor's note, or certification from a recognized training program. However, it's important to note that not all places require such documentation. In essence, the need for special identification or documentation for service dogs is not universal. It largely depends on the specific laws and regulations of a given area. So, while some places may require documentation, others may not. Now, what about grocery and retail stores? Can service dogs go into grocery stores and other retail stores? That's a question that's often asked. The simple answer is yes, they can. In many regions, laws protect the rights of service dog handlers, allowing these dogs to accompany their handlers into most public places, including retail stores. However, it's important to be aware that the specifics can vary. In some places, there may be certain limitations or requirements. For instance, the service dog must be under control at all times and cannot pose a direct threat to the health or safety of others. It's also worth noting that these laws apply to service dogs, not to therapy or emotional support animals. Service dogs are specially trained to perform tasks for individuals with disabilities, which distinguishes them from other types of assistance animals. So, service dogs are generally allowed in retail stores. But what should you do if you encounter a service dog in public? Or what should you do if you encounter a service dog in public? This question often pops up, and it's important to address it. Encountering a service dog isn't an everyday occurrence for most folks, and it can be a bit of a puzzle figuring out the correct etiquette. Firstly, always remember that a service dog is not a pet, but a working animal with a crucial job to do. Whether they're guiding their handler, alerting them to sounds, or performing other tasks, these dogs are busy making life easier for their humans. Don't distract the dog by petting, feeding, or trying to play with it. This could interfere with its work and potentially put the handler in danger. If you're tempted to interact, it's always best to ask the handler first. Lastly, teach children to respect service dogs and their space. This will help ensure both the safety and the effectiveness of these hard-working animals. Remember, a service dog is working, so it's crucial to respect their space. Now, are there any exceptions to where service dogs are allowed? Are there any exceptions to where service dogs are allowed? And what are the consequences for denying access to a service dog? Well, the reality is that there may be a few exceptions. For instance, certain areas in hospitals like sterile environments or places where the presence of a dog might compromise safety may be off limits. Similarly, private properties have the right to deny access. However, these exceptions are few and far between. Now let's shift gears and talk about consequences. Denying access to a service dog and its handler is considered discrimination in many jurisdictions. Consequences can range from fines to potential legal action. The severity of the penalty usually depends on the specific laws of the region. Remember, service dogs are not pets. They're working animals trained to assist individuals with disabilities. They have rights, and so do their handlers. So while there may be exceptions, denying access to a service dog can have serious legal consequences. So, we've covered a lot of ground today about where service dogs are allowed. We've learned about the vital roles these dogs play, performing tasks that range from helping individuals with physical disabilities to offering emotional support. We've delved into where these incredible animals are permitted, from businesses, restaurants, and hotels to public transportation and educational institutions. We've also explored the specific rules about service dogs in food establishments and retail stores. And we've looked at the important etiquette to follow when encountering a service dog in public. We've noted that while some places may require documentation or identification for these dogs, others may not. And we've underscored the importance of understanding any exceptions to these rules, as well as the potential consequences for denying access to service dogs. Remember, it's crucial to be aware of the laws and regulations regarding service dogs in your specific area. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope this video has been informative and helpful.